Long before the death of the last northern white rhino in the wild, there was the dodo, a large flightless bird that roamed the coastal woods of Mauritius, an island off the coast of Madagascar. The dodo thrived in its habitat. But in 1598, the dodo faced a world-ending threat: the arrival of white Europeans who were hungry for resources to fuel their emerging capitalist nations. With guns and axes, Dutch sailors carved up the dodo's habitat, leaving few safe havens for the bird. Out in the open with nowhere left to hide, those birds that didn't die from destruction of their habitat were killed by the barrel of Dutch guns and cooked in Dutch kettles. By 1662, the last dodo perished. The Dutch colonizers had driven the species into extinction, and the beastly bird of Mauritius soon faded into myth. Sadly, this is a common story, one that's been unfolding and accelerating over the last 4 centuries. Life on Earth as we know it is dying. A mass extinction event, the likes of which this planet has only experienced 5 other times, is now occurring. Today, we'll explore the underlying forces driving this catastrophic die-off. We'll journey from the fur trappers of North American colonies to the agro-industrial feedlots of Brazil, all the way to the machines of industry. This is the story of the 6th extinction, a story of its dark roots and the manifold ways we might reverse it. This video is sponsored by Brilliant. While Dutch sailors were hacking apart the Mauritian coastline for wood and dodo meat, the English and French were across the ocean sinking their claws into the lush landscapes stewarded by the people of Turtle Island, which is now called North America. The violent colonization of North American capitalists, who were eager to ship wood, minerals, and food back home to their growing nations, was not only devastating for those who were already living there, but these extraction regimes were also disastrous for the natural world that had grown abundant under the watchful eye of indigenous farmers, fishers, hunters, and communities. The waters of the northern Atlantic are a perfect example of this abundance. In his book, The Mortal Sea, environmental historian Jeffrey Bolster explains that before the influx of European colonial presence, the coastal ecosystems of North America teemed with gargantuan fish and lobsters. Journals of sea captains from the late 1500s, like Charles Lee, reported that they encountered the greatest multitude of lobsters they ever heard of. While another report in 1602 from sailor John Brereton claimed that the boat's crew had fished so much cod in 5 or 6 hours that they had pestered their ship so with codfish that they threw numbers of them overboard again. But with the continued expansion of white European settler colonialists throughout the 1600s, this all changed. Fish population and size dwindled, and forest habitats were clear-cut and demolished. The colonists viewed the landscape as an infinite resource to harvest, develop into monocropped farmland, fish up, and sell back to European markets. As the flood of white bodies, axes, and guns permeated Turtle Island throughout the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, European colonists violently replaced various forms of indigenous land stewardship with commodity-based, profit-oriented systems. One early European invader, James Rozier, quite bluntly reveals this commoditizing worldview when he refers to the abundance of life in North America as the profits and fruits that are naturally on these islands. And environmental historian William Cronin points out in his book Changes in the Land that timber products were among the earliest merchantable commodities colonists sent back to Europe to repay their debts to financial backers. He goes on to write that in 1621, when the Pilgrims made their first shipment home, the ship's hold was laden with good clapboard as full as she could stow. As a result of this transformation from stewardship to commodification and extraction, the flora and fauna of North America suffered catastrophic losses. Bison were hunted to near extinction, the passenger pigeon, which once darkened the sky with its numbers, ceased to exist by 1914, and the ivory-bill woodpecker, which once found its home in the coastal woods of the American South, was logged out of existence. But no animal is more emblematic of this new relationship with the land than the beaver. From the late 1600s to the early 1900s, beaver populations plummeted from an estimated 60 million to just 100,000. All because back home in Europe, fur-lined top hats were the hottest fashion. Instead of understanding and recognizing the beaver as a crucial species in many North American ecosystems, French, English, and Dutch fur traders developed a massive market that only saw the animals as commodities. Beavers were just living pelts waiting to be trapped, skinned, and sold for profit. But luckily for the beaver, the fur-lined top hat eventually faded out of fashion, and populations were able to somewhat stabilize. But unfortunately for those indigenous to Turtle Island, as well as the North American flora and fauna, the settler colonial Europeans, with their extractivist and commodifying economies, were here to stay. This destruction at the hands of early settler colonial economies is just a taste of what's to come. Today, we're on the precipice of one of the largest extinction events in Earth's history. The reality of life on Earth is that all species will face extinction. From the earliest single-cell organisms of the Eoarchaean era to the Stegosaurus of the late Jurassic period, flora and fauna fade into extinction as other life more suited to the ecosystem's niche takes its place. Extinction and replacement are the consequences of evolution. But across the course of Earth's history, there have been punctuation points. 5 moments in time that have been catastrophic for life. 5 mass extinction events where, over the course of roughly 3 million years, the diversity of species dramatically declined. The most famous of which was the mass die-off of dinosaurs 65 million years ago, and we are now living in the 6th one. For reasons we'll dive into soon, plants, animals, and general life on Earth are dying off at rates far higher than normal, with evidence pointing to extinction rates as high as 1,000 times the usual background pace. Which means, as researcher Gerardo Ceballos explains, what we've lost in 100 years would have been lost in 10,000 years in normal times. Indeed, the World Wildlife Fund's Global Living Planet Index, which averages together the change in abundance of over 5,000 species worldwide, found an average decline of 69% in population since 1970. While this number is pretty limited in its scope, it still gives us a glimpse at the potential extinction event we're now facing. According to a 2019 UN report, over 1 million species will be threatened with extinction over the next few decades. And even if some species are able to thrive, the absence of just one keystone animal, plant, or insect could send a chain reaction of extinction through a local ecosystem. This interconnected reliance of local biomes is most famously exemplified by the gray wolf, which was hunted out of Yellowstone National Park in the 1930s. The absence of the wolf triggered a cascade of consequences. Elk populations, free from their apex predator, exploded in numbers, which meant that one of their primary food sources, willow trees, declined dramatically. The lack of these trees, which were also a food source for beavers, meant fewer beavers and natural dams along the banks of Yellowstone's rivers, leading to a transformation in the very way rivers flowed. This is called a trophic cascade, and reveals both how interconnected an ecosystem is and how vulnerable it can be to the loss of just one keystone species. So when the IPCC reports that 3 to 14% of species will likely face high risk of extinction at global warming levels of 1.5 degrees Celsius, and that will increase up to 3 to 48% of species at 5 degrees Celsius, this could have vast ripple effects across the Earth's habitats. But mass extinction doesn't just mean catastrophe for millions of species eradicated from their ecosystem. It also spells disaster for human economies and social organization. Because after all, our systems of production, our economies, are built on the foundation of thriving and biodiverse ecosystems. So when those ecosystems collapse, whether through the domino effect of the disappearance of a keystone species or through more general extinction and extraction, we are greatly affected. The absence of pollinator insects means the absence of crops in fields. The lack of kelp and mangroves along coastal waters means increased floods and fewer fish. The absence of the wolf means more deer and more disease. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. We've built our world, our agriculture, our cities, around a specific structure of nature. So when that structure begins to crumble, when species die off, when ecosystems unravel, our way of life suffers. So in order to keep things from unraveling even further, we need to understand why this is all happening. The legacy of European colonial resource extraction is alive and well in the Brazilian Amazon. There, trees that are home to a diverse range of animals and insects are slashed and burned to make room for industrial soy farms and ranches. This Amazonian deforestation is eerily similar to what we witnessed in the colonies along the Atlantic coast of North America. Land dramatically changed from one of forest or wetland to one of a single crop or a single animal. In short, we terraformed Earth. There are multiple drivers of the growing extinction rates we're witnessing today. And at the top of that list is land use change, or the transformation of habitat into a vastly different shape to the point where a species is not able to adapt to their new environment. We can see here that land use has dramatically increased since the 1700s, and always at the bleeding edge of that frontier is agriculture. According to the UN Food and Agriculture Association, agricultural land takes up almost half of all habitable land, and is responsible for 90% of deforestation and 70% of the world's freshwater use. And that sustained transformation of ecosystems into landscapes more suitable for industrial agricultural systems has spelled disaster for biodiversity. Species are being pushed to extinction because of land use change, and the last decade of deforestation along the edges of the Amazon rainforest are a perfect microcosm of this. As a result of habitat loss, over 10,000 species of plants and animals risk extinction along the Amazon. But land use change is just one of the drivers forcing extinction. Climate change is another, and could yet prove to be the most consequential if temperatures continue to rise over the next century. Whether it was intense volcanic activity, rapid growth of plants, or impact dust from an asteroid blocking out the sun, the last 5 mass extinctions were all precipitated due to shifts in climate. But if those climate shifts occurred over the course of thousands of years, if not millions of years, our current emissions rate is accelerating that climate transformation to the scale of hundreds of years. Changes in global temperatures that quick can spell disaster for ecosystems. It forces animals out of their normal geographic zones, causes weather events like droughts and floods in locations ill-equipped to deal with that kind of weather, and creates unadaptable conditions. As a recent IPCC report notes, climate change is already having world-shaking consequences. Approximately half of the species assessed globally have shifted poleward or to higher elevations. Hundreds of local losses of species have been driven by increases in the magnitude of heat extremes, as well as mass mortality events on land and in the ocean, and loss of kelp forests. In short, changing temperatures and climates will drive species to extinction around the world if left unchecked. And those that are left alive after habitat loss and pressures of climate change must face the added threat of over-extraction. Much like the dodos of Mauritius or the gray wolves of Yellowstone, species extinction can be directly driven by the barrel of the gun or the snare of the net. Fish species around the world, like yellowfin tuna, are threatened because of our insatiable appetite for extraction of certain fish. And on land, we're seeing this everywhere from the trade of ivory decimating the northern white rhino population, to African forest elephants on the brink of extinction for their tusks, or to pangolins hunted for their scales to put in medicinal products. But at the heart of all these factors that are driving extinction isn't human nature. It's not our inherent hatred of other species that is driving an increased extinction rate, but instead our economic system, our mode of production. Yes, that's right, it's capitalism. To uncover the root cause of the 6th mass extinction, we need to travel once again back to the fur trappers of North America. It's here, along the banks of rivers dammed up by beavers, that fur trappers took part in an early instance of capitalist commodification of the natural world. And in doing so, they drove a species to the brink of destruction. While there was certainly more at play, like shifting climates or the introduction of new diseases, many indicators point to the emergence of the European market economy throughout the North American landscape as a key driver of ecosystems change. Prior to the capitalist commodification of natural resources, transforming the very trees and animals into goods to be refined and sold for money, indigenous communities employed a range of tactics and land interventions that, while still impacting the landscape, did so in a way that minimized their footprint. As the author of a recent paper on the impact of pre-colonial communities on the North American landscapes notes, indigenous North Americans thrived under changing forest conditions not by intensively managing them, but by adapting to them and the changing environment. It was only with the introduction of monocultures of European seed strains, animals, and industrial logging that fed production across the Atlantic that we began to see the decline of species on a broader scale. As Cronin put it in Changes of the Land, New England ecology was transformed as the region became integrated with the emerging capitalist economy of the North Atlantic. Capitalism and environmental degradation went hand in hand. Because under capitalism, we face an unresolvable contradiction. In order to live, we need the natural world with all of its wonderfully complex and life-giving ecosystems. But inside a mode of capitalist production, we must also extract, subjugate, and destroy that natural world to make a living. One of the foundational characteristics of a capitalist economy is the production of goods for exchange value rather than use value. In other words, we're producing materials not based on necessity or how well they work, but primarily for how much the product can sell for on the market. As a result, under capitalism, we're driven to extract, produce, and accumulate far above levels that are needed to satiate the conditions to thrive, because it is profitable to do so. In the real world, this looks like the global meat market that deforests vast swaths of the Amazon rainforest because we've transformed animal agriculture into an industrial machine. In order to squeeze maximum value out of a cow, animal agriculture, which used to look like a collection of small ranchers and herders before capitalism, has now become mechanized, consolidated, and homogeneous. This means that as farmers and ranchers cut down the edges of the biodiverse Amazonian habitat, they are replacing them with just a couple of species of soybean for animal feed and cattle for meat. Meatpacking giants like JBS, who know that more products sold means more profits in their pocket, push industrial ranching companies like AgroSB to gobble up millions of acres of land at any cost to raise as many cows and produce as much meat as possible. And often that cost is the destruction of ecosystem, which leads to habitat loss and species extinction. In short, the endless cycle of accumulation under capitalism, wherein capitalists make profits, plug those profits into even more labor and extraction to make even more profits, is untenable for the natural world. The end result of this cycle of accumulation is climate chaos and species extinction. Now, a common response to this is that capitalism can't possibly be at the heart of the sixth mass extinction because as long as humans have roamed the earth, we've been driving animals extinct. While that is indeed partly correct, it's a little bit like comparing apples to oranges. It is true that early humans in the Pleistocene did hunt megafauna like mastodons and the ground sloth to extinction. But it's important to note that these were much smaller blips on the graph of extinction. The rate and scale of extinction we're facing today is larger than the megafauna extinctions of the Pleistocene. In addition, these extinctions were not necessarily a case of eradication, but of replacement. As conservation biologist Ian Rappel notes, in many cases, the ecological roles of these large animals were subsequently taken up by human beings themselves, as they pushed and pulled at local ecosystems to generate their own social metabolism through the controlled use of fire, shifting agriculture, and the proactive management of woodlands, tundra, and savanna. Early humans, then, essentially became their own megafauna in their ecosystems, becoming crucial stewards to the land. What we are witnessing today is not that. It is the mass eradication and displacement of habitat, the mass extraction of the natural world driven by capitalism's need to commodify and produce. Human nature did not drive ranchers and soybean farmers to slash and burn the Amazon rainforest. The hunt for profits did. The guns of poachers that drove the northern white rhino to extinction did so in pursuit of the riches those tusks would bring. And the continued expansion, extraction, and burning of fossil fuels powering the climate crisis, pushing millions of species to the brink, has been propelled by the pursuit of padding the wallets of those in power. So as plants and animals die, we must not blame human nature. That's both ahistorical and ignores the fact that there are countless ways to live with, instead of against, the natural world. So to reverse the sixth mass extinction, we must grapple with our mode of production. We must grapple with capitalism. If the stories of the peregrine falcon, the bald eagle, or the Iberian lynx can be anything, they should be a balm to the doom we're facing. All three of these species faced down the surety of annihilation and were guided back from the brink. What gives me hope is that the sixth mass extinction is not set in stone. What we do right now, tomorrow, or a year down the line will have vast ramifications not only for us humans and our descendants, but for millions of species of life on this planet. But to do the work, we must first figure out effective ways to avoid the biodiversity collapse we're beginning to witness today. One of the more pervasive capitalist solutions to the sixth mass extinction and habitat loss more generally is the concept of ecosystem services. Popularized by the United Nations' Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, which was published in 2005, the idea of ecosystem services is to identify and often quantify the ways in which the natural world benefits humans. Or in other words, calculating the goods and services that nature provides to humanity. The idea behind ecosystem services is that in defining and putting monetary value on the intangibles of ecosystems like disease control, water filtration, or oxygen production, capitalist markets and decision makers will be much more likely to understand and protect biodiverse habitats. Indeed, this is exactly what scholar activist Vandana Shiva did to block limestone mining in India's Missouri Hills in 1982. She spent months researching the impact that limestone mining had on water security and found that
the mountains and the aquifers and the limestone did a better job just being as they were than when they were mined.
Shiva submitted her findings and, together with pressure from activists, successfully blocked limestone mining operations in the Missouri Hills. While successful, this is ultimately a stopgap approach. A method of harm reduction that might be effective in the very short term, but is susceptible to being overturned, because it ultimately capitulates to the capitalist mode of commodifying nature. It still envisions habitat and ecosystems as commodities that service a capitalist market. And if, for some reason, the spreadsheets reveal that it's more profitable to extract than preserve, capitalists will do just that. This means that while we are trying to reduce the harm of capitalism, we also need to envision ways that hack at the rotten roots of the sixth mass extinction. And no, land and habitat conservation is not enough. Indeed, the mindset of conservation, or the act of protecting ecosystems from human intervention, is ahistorical. Humans have long been integral parts of the landscapes, using controlled burns, roving agriculture, and spreading seeds through foraging. Indeed, those that still maintain a stewardship approach to the land foster habitats containing 80% of the world's current biodiversity. So while we do need conservation in the short term, we also need to be working towards an anti-capitalist mode of production that seeks a co-thriving of both the natural world and human economies in the long term. One blueprint for a long-term approach comes from authors Drew Pendergrass and Troy Vitesse, who envision a half-Earth socialism approach to the sixth mass extinction. For them, a planned economy that focuses on minimal impact on the land, while also setting aside rewilding and then stewarding 50% of the Earth for the natural world to thrive, is the optimal path away from climate chaos and species extinction. Or there are the imaginings of solar pump. Cities and towns where our technologies and our livelihoods are completely enmeshed with nature, so that we don't have to destroy a forest in order to have reliable shelter and food on the table. These threads have two necessary ingredients. First, the transformation of an economy from one of exchange to one of use, and in doing so, minimizing our collective impact on the world. And second, blending the line between humans and nature in a way that recognizes the role humanity has always played as a part of and not separate from our surroundings. But to build a future that fosters a harmonious relationship with the natural world, we first need to end our system of global capitalism, a mission that many of the countries of the imperial periphery have already recognized and enshrined in the words of the Cochabamba People's Agreement in 2010. There, they write, "Humanity confronts a great dilemma: to continue on the path of capitalism, depredation, and death, or to choose the path of harmony with nature and respect for life." So, to prevent the fate of the dodo and the northern white rhino from eradicating life around the world, we must struggle for a world beyond capitalism. A world rich not with profit, but with life. A world that embraces the interconnectedness of humans and nature. A world worth fighting for. A world that will certainly have a much smaller animal agriculture industry. Because the unfortunate fact is that animal agriculture within capitalism not only is driving land use change, but also climate change. Which is why next month's video dives into the hard questions of animal agriculture and asks things like whether we should all be vegan or not. And if you don't want to wait a month, you can watch that video right now if you're a Nebula subscriber, because I put all my videos up on Nebula a month before they go up on YouTube. Meanwhile, we need biologists, ecologists, and much more researching and developing solutions to the looming biodiversity crisis. People who are steeped in practices of analytical and scientific thinking, which is why I've always loved Brilliant.org. Brilliant is a website and app that uses a visual, hands-on approach to help build those next generation of scientists that can help us better understand the crisis we're now facing. Because with Brilliant, you learn by doing. You can play around with interactive puzzles and games that make difficult to understand concepts like quantum mechanics actually fun to learn. Their courses are laid out like a story and broken down into awesome visual pieces and interactive puzzles so that you can tackle them a little bit at a time. Like for example, Brilliant's wonderful course on scientific thinking. Understanding the foundations of the scientific method is essential to forging a renewable and biodiverse future. And Brilliant has made grasping the core concepts of the scientific method intuitive and fun. This little interactive bridge puzzle, for example, helps you understand the importance of experimentation while you engineer the optimal structure across a gap. This type of interactivity is peppered all throughout Brilliant's thousands of lessons, and there's something for everyone, from foundational and advanced math, to AI, to data science, to neural networks, and much more. So to get started for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/OCC or click the link in the description, and the first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. And if you want to watch even more OCC videos, I recommend clicking on the video on screen right now about the dark toll of electric car manufacturing. Otherwise, I'll see you next month.